afternoon. You are in programs and considerations for ending veteran homelessness. So if that was not the presentation you hoped to be in, this would be a good time to find the one you were looking for. But we are very glad to have you in this session today. My name is Marie Morrison. I work with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, Built for Zero, and I'm your moderator and a presenter today, along with Dr. Cheryl Forchuk, who's done lots of research around veterans and homelessness, and we'll be speaking today about women veterans experiencing homelessness. And we also have Amber Stewart, who's with the BC Yukon Royal Canadian Legion Foundation, who will be talking about Veteran House Victoria. So very excited to speak alongside these folks, and just want to say thanks to everyone in the room who has served or their families, and to thank you for your service, and to acknowledge that Indigenous Veterans Day is coming up on November 8th and Remembrance Day on November 11th, so we're not far away from that. There are poppies at the registration desk through the Royal Canadian Legion, who use their poppy fund in part to support veterans experiencing homelessness. So thank you for being here today. I also want to acknowledge that we're on the unceded and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples, who have been here for time immemorial. And before settlers came, Indigenous people knew of this land as Kitchezidi, which is Great River, which is now what the Ottawa River is called. And that the name Ottawa in Anishinaabe is Ottawa, which is the trading place where people came from the four directions through all the rivers to trade in this area. And there are still sacred ceremonial sites throughout this region that reflect the richness of the area's Indigenous past, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We have a responsibility to acknowledge and understand this history in the current experience of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, and for this understanding to inform the work that we do, so that we can first stop perpetuating the damaging effects of colonization, and second, can begin to repair them. And I want to share some information around Canadian policies that have harmed many Indigenous veterans who have served as equals on the battlefield, but not at home. It was not until 1995, 50 years after the Second World War, that Indigenous peoples were allowed to lay Remembrance Day wreaths at the National Memorial to remember and honor dead comrades. After the First World War, returning veterans did not receive the same assistance as other returning soldiers. Many First Nations veterans from the Second World War had to either give up their Indian status to join the war effort, or found that when they returned home after fighting overseas for Canada, they were no longer considered Indians, because the Indian Act specified that Indians absent from the reserve for 4 years or longer were no longer Indians. Restrictions of the Indian Act prevented veterans from learning about available benefits and programs, and when they did access those benefit, grant payouts were given to the Indian agent rather than the individual. The lives of numerous Indigenous veterans ended in despair and poverty, including Tommy Prince, who is the most decorated Indigenous war veteran, who in 1977 died homeless at the age of 62 in Winnipeg. Indigenous veteran homelessness in Canada highlights the cumulative ways in which homelessness, former military service, and Indigenous identity intersect to create unique risk factors that we should all be aware of. As I mentioned, I'm with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness and the Built for Zero program, and we do some work around veteran homelessness that I wanted to share with you today. So the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is the group putting on this conference, and we're a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities across Canada working to end homelessness. Built for Zero is one of our initiatives. It's an ambitious national change effort to help a core group of leading communities to end chronic and veteran homelessness as a starting place, a first step to eliminating homelessness in Canada. We are seeking to create a tipping point in Canada with enough functional zero proof points demonstrating that homelessness can be rare and brief, it's not inevitable or a way of life, such that ending homelessness becomes an expectation in every community. So not only is ending homelessness the right thing to do generally, but Canadians owe a duty of care to veterans for the sacrifices they have made and continue to make for their service. While these numbers are small, solving for veteran homelessness helps us learn what it's going to take to end all veteran homelessness. It's an area of clear federal responsibility, which helps highlight what is possible and gives government what is the word I'm looking for? The gumption to know that we can then look at good policies that work to end rather than to manage homelessness. And it helps to build that support in communities and really sets a foundation for ending all homelessness in Canada. So we've identified a number of key milestones that communities move through on their work towards working to end veteran homelessness. The first is building the will, gathering a team together, identifying the goal and the focus on ending veteran homelessness, and then building strong relationships between veteran service organizations that have been doing this work for many years and the homelessness response sector that hasn't always understood the culture of veterans, and bringing these groups together to work in new ways. Then folks work together to understand the scope of veteran homelessness in their community and bring that data together, person-specific data, to both coordinate services and again understand the scope of the problem in their community. Then they work to bring resources together in a coordinated way to house folks, and then work towards this milestone of functional zero, which I'll say a little bit more about in a moment. So we started this work in 2019 and have been learning alongside communities what it takes to end veteran homelessness or work towards an end to veteran homelessness. We're currently working with 26 communities across Canada who have said, yep, we want to work together on this issue. 16 of these communities so far, and we haven't yet fully announced it, but Windsor-Essex is the most recent community to be confirmed with us as having all of the elements necessary for veteran quality data as best as they can in their community. And so now there are 17 communities of the ones we're working with that have this data. There are 3 communities who have confirmed functional zero: London, Ontario, St. Thomas, Elgin, and Fort McMurray, Alberta. Did I hear a yeah? Cheryl would have been a part of that, like your work in London, and this effort around veteran homelessness had been underway for a long time in London, and London was the first community to reach that milestone with us. So functional zero, and there's a video here if you're wanting to watch that later, but we're really looking that homelessness is rare and measurably so, and that the system has the capacity to house people is equal or greater than the number of new folks coming in to experience homelessness. And it's really operating on a full accounting of all homelessness at all times with that quality data. And it's not about just getting there, it's really the first milestone. It's then looking about, okay, now that we've gotten to that point, how do we sustain this over time?
Being homeless.
And then this is just more specific, but again, we have a very specific measurable definition. We have a number of criteria that we look at, that we walk through to make sure the data remains quality, that systems are set up, and there's some further information here on that definition and the work that goes into confirming a functional zero in a community. But generally, the numbers are smaller in the communities for a lot of communities, and so you are looking at having the inflow be greater than the outflow, but when those numbers are small, we're looking at 3 or less. So holding at 3 or less for 3 or greater months is sort of that functional zero threshold. And again, those keys that we're finding again and again, having those shared aims and measurable definitions, having that quality data, coordinating between homelessness response sector and veteran service organizations, and using the data to drive improvement and to target resources. So in Built for Zero, we provide tools, resources, peer connection, and support for communities working on this. We have information on our website. I'll show you that in a moment. We provide data and coaching support. We have some online change packages with tools for communities that are working with us, online courses, national community practice calls, and a newsletter with updates and resources. So on our veteran resource page, we have information on what it is to define and then to veteran homelessness, the progress that's been happening so far. Who are those key veteran service organizations that are out there doing work on homelessness that we should be looking to connect with in communities? Veteran and veteran homelessness in Canada information. So there isn't really a ton, but we've pulled together what we can, sort of those practical resources if you're trying to find information out what's sort of relevant and more recent. And training tools and resources to end veteran homelessness. One of which is the Ending Veteran Homelessness Guide, so sort of walking communities step by step through the processes that we use in Built for Zero. And myths and fact sheets, because again, when we started this work, really realizing that the homelessness sector knew very little about veterans and veteran services, and so we were hearing a lot of common questions or myths, and so we took those and we did a bit of a myth and fact sheet. We are supported in part by the Government of Canada through the Veteran Family and Veteran and Family Wellbeing Fund and the Veteran Homelessness Program. And so the Veteran Homelessness Program, on their website, they talk about the programs that have been provided, the capacity building funding. So Built for Zero is one of the programs through the Canadian Alliance that has been funded for the Veteran Homelessness Program to work with communities. And then there also are service-specific programs that you'll find listed there more recently. So that is just a little bit about us and the work that we're doing, but I really want to highlight and give lots of time to our other speakers. We're going to take questions at the end. So I'm just going to switch over presentations and I'll invite Dr. Cheryl Forchuk to come up.
You can just switch this one.
I'll switch and get you all set up. There you go.
Thank you. And that's a really great segue into the presentation I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be highlighting some of the points I think that have already been raised. You saw that the lots of you saw on that. We do have funding for this project from Infrastructure Canada. And in a lot of our earlier work, one of the things that I found concerning, I'll come back to this, is we did not have enough women in our studies to do a gender analysis, yet the women would talk to us about some of the issues, but given the lack of literature, we really felt we needed to do it right and to do it big. And so I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail. So what I'm hoping we can do in this very brief time is talk a bit about some potential causes and some gender-specific things to be thinking about. In terms of disclosures, we do have money for this project from Infrastructure Canada. No conflicts of interest with financial sponsors. Unfortunately, we don't make much money working in the homeless field. We don't gain by it. And as always, like, there was a lack of space for putting in the various groups, but there's always a group behind this. Although I'm speaking here as an individual, it's not as an individual, it is as a group. And not only researchers, which would be obvious, we do have a couple of Indigenous community representations because we really feel it will be important to look at the specific Indigenous issues for many, building on the very issues raised by Marie, with physicians such as at our OSI clinics, frontline workers, veterans themselves, including representation from the National Office for the Royal Canadian Legion. We also have Veterans Affairs Canada, etc. So we have the dream team helping us and trying to make sure that we don't impose our own biases, that they can call us on it. I did want to just give a trigger warning because it's difficult to discuss this issue with women without also talking about trauma, homelessness, mental health, and military experiences. Basically, the big issue is there is a lack of research about women veterans homelessness in Canada. That struck me as a systematic review. I'm going to go into a bit more. When I say the majority of research is from the U.S., it's actually all of the research in this topic is basically from the U.S. And that literature talks about the greater risk for unemployment, trauma, PTSD, etc., lack of housing for those with children. And then when we consider as well that our definition of veteran includes RC&P, there's nothing. There's nothing, zero. So how many Canadian veterans are women? So the most recent stats, Canada, like if you're looking at the group as a whole, like part of the thing depends what numbers, because it goes up year by year, the percentage of women. So if you look at new recruits, you would get a higher number. But if you're looking at the current, we're talking by Stats Canada 6.2, which means 1 in 6 veterans, essentially. 75,000 people. And how many Canadian veterans are experiencing homelessness? Again, I would say we're largely guessing because we don't actually know how many people in Canada are homeless. And there's many issues. So these are some estimates people give. Like any of these estimates, you got to take with a bucket of salt. But some of the work that has been done in that area suggests that women veterans could be 4 times more likely to be homeless than civilian women. And how many programs for veterans, particularly when we're looking at housing, really consider women? We talk about this lack of research and services. I had the opportunity to actually present to that subcommittee and raise this issue that what we find is a lot of the housing programs involve congregate living, tiny homes, but the majority, you heard, we solved this problem first in London, the majority of the women we housed had kids. Are you going to put them in congregate living or tiny homes? So there's this assumption. Are there enough accessible problems? And the other thing, in terms of the literature, which is, I'll come back there. But we don't look at trauma prior to military service. Because we did not have enough women in our prior studies, I made a point of talking to all the women we did have to get a sense of that. And this issue of trauma prior to the military compounding it was really an important issue. But we need enough to really tease into it. I would say we kind of suspect the needs are not being met. So we did this systematic review, given the women I'm talking to are saying we're different, our needs are not being met, and what this just tells you all the different places we looked. We only found 26 studies on this topic. None of them were from Canada. This just gives you a bit of a breakdown. So again, what we ended up screening, you can see we started with 52. We screened out a lot for different reasons, but there was only 14 studies worldwide that looked specifically at women veterans and homelessness, but that really did the deep dive there. And when we look at that big number, 52, which many of them were duplicate studies, other reasons had to be cut out, 100% of them were from the US. And we know context really matters. So when we say, what do we know about women veterans in Canada? Like, not much, right? And I wanted to also highlight, and again, going back to Marie's comments around Indigenous veterans, even though we're speaking about women, one of the reasons I wanted to have a couple of Indigenous organizations, and they said that we welcome more if other people would like to join us, but we have a couple of groups going to help us with that. Similarly with our previous studies, we did not have adequate Indigenous people to do a proper analysis. Like in our 1-4 City project, we had not, given the complete lack I would hate to do something so shallow and then everybody would point to it, right? And it would be too shallow. So we're hoping to try to deal with that. We did a systematic review. We went back 30 years. Worldwide, we found one paper 25 years ago from the US that talked about veteran homelessness where the people were indigenous. So if we could do one paper with the women, we would double the worldwide literature and have something more, something in this century. Because the previous one was in the last century. So this is, I consider this to be very important. And then even with that one paper, they were almost 98% male in this study. So anyway, and I will say I have this commercial thing for the study. If anyone wants to pick up our posters, I have them here. But I'm trying to motivate you. Yes, we got to solve this, right? So these are the objectives. I'm going to pick up the pace a bit, but we're doing something similar to what we did in our early work with veterans. Is we want to be solution focused. There's no sense having somebody saying, "What's it like being homeless?" We know it's awful, right? The bigger problem, more important problem is how do we get people out of it? So in talking to the women, we want to talk about their military experience, their interaction with the homeless experience, but what works and what doesn't? If you're going to design a program, what would it look like? What are the key features? So that we can really look at producing something that's better. We go to up to 160. We've got mixed methods. We're recruiting across Canada. And we will also be having focus groups with the homeless serving sector once we get enough data. Because and I would say the homeless serving sector as well, many people, and the veteran serving sector are very much looking forward to this data. Most of the groups we've talked to, because of this complete lack, trying to build programs in the lack of evidence is not an ideal position. What we're finding is people talk about transitional housing, but it's mostly males living there. I've talked to some veteran housing projects that in over a decade have not seen a single woman. And again, part of it, I think, relates to the type of housing that's offered. Psychological issues, following service could affect learning and skill development. We talked about the waiting lists, the awareness for supportive veteran housing, awareness of what a veteran actually is, this is a group that is really, really hard to find, which is what we found in our earlier studies as well. But when you're looking at a specific subset, like women, and some of the things we found, sometimes even when directly asked if they're a veteran, they say no. When we had our 4-city project in London, Toronto, Calgary, and Victoria, and we talked to the people about that at that time, it's part of it. There is military culture in terms of thinking of the group rather than thinking of yourself. They knew they could get more resources by identifying as a veteran, but if they're dealing with addiction issues and homelessness, they felt to identify made the larger group look bad. And so rather than looking at that personal thing that they could get, they would in some ways deny themselves. When we talked to them about what they needed for recovery previously, that's why they talk about harm reduction, to get their substance use under control, but because it had been a very long-standing issue, that it could not be someplace looking at zero tolerance and abrupt stopping. Housing first, because they couldn't deal with their issues while they were on the street. But reclaiming that veteran status was also an important part, that they had denied that part of their identity. And so they felt part of feeling whole again was to reclaim that. And the women we're talking about talk about very similar things. They talk about being, again, directly asked, and they might say no. They also talk about at times not being asked. And they know it's one of the questions they're supposed to be asked. And that people are making assumptions as to who looks like a vet. And therefore they're not always being asked. We're hoping that we can do something to address this knowledge gap, which is more than a gap, right? And really the focus is around as I say, it's on strategies, it's on solutions. And we want to look at developing recommendations for all the programs, such as the Green Alliance. I know you used our previous work, but we're going to hope to enhance that with some gender specifics and get some evidence-based recommendations for policy and practice changes. So I'm going to just skip through that because I think that we just really need this work. And as I say, I do have posters for the current project. We are doing great. We are getting some of the women, despite being very hard to find, and with the help of the various groups and other people you see represented here. But it takes a lot of work. We feel like it's detective work at times because people are often living in the woods. We actually have more people that have been identified that want to participate than we've actually got in yet, but I always call them, they're still in the air for a while till they land because they often have cell phones that only work when they're in town. And then like they may be in the woods and coming in once a month for supplies, and then so we leave messages at the places they're gonna go so they can try to coordinate it at the one time they're in town. So it's very complex. The ones that have been recently housed certainly are easier to find. We've got references here, which I'm sure you're all speed readers and can commit this to memory. But if you want any of that, let me know, and we'll have the questions at the end. I'll let you figure out the next one.
And I saw someone was trying to take a picture of that, so I'm just.
Oh, okay.
There, if anyone wanted that information. Thank you. Are people having trouble hearing in the back a little bit? Okay, thanks for doing that though. There you go. Awesome. Thanks. Hey everybody. If there's a definition of intimidation, I'm standing here with it. I was saying on an almost weekly basis, I quote Cheryl's work when people ask me about veterans homelessness, and almost as often I'm into the work that Marie's doing. So with that today, I come in very humble shoes to just talk about our scrappy little program that we have in Victoria here called Veterans House Victoria. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber Stewart. I am the Executive Director of the Legion Foundation, BC Yukon. So I'll start by sort of a little bit of education about the Legion that I think a lot of people don't know, and then how the Legion Foundation fits in with this. So the Legion is a national organization, and so at the top of any national organization is what we call Dominion Command. So that's sort of our federal governance, if you will. We then have provincial commands at each level, and at the BC Yukon command level, we have 18 zones that are organized, and within those zones we have 145 branches. So in BC, we represent over 49,000 members of the Royal Canadian Legion, and nationally, we're well up over 250,000 members of the Royal Canadian Legion. So this year, and you'll notice this Poppy campaign just started on Friday, and will run until Remembrance Day. And most of the people that you see when you go to Save on Foods, in my case in BC or anywhere, out doing what we call poppy tagging, those are often Legion volunteers. And you're seeing them at the end of a lot of work. Most of them come back from a little break in the summer, and they hit the ground running. And they organize all of the volunteers, all dropping off poppies everywhere, going to local schools and making sure that there's a presence known there, offering speakers to come talk to classes and to young people about remembrance and the importance and just everything that was given by those that served before us. And we could not do the work that we do without those amazing volunteers across the country. So the Legion Foundation sort of sits adjacent to the provincial command. So we are a registered charity with a fundraising arm of the Royal Canadian Legion in the BC and Yukon area.
And we were established in 1997. We're super small. It's me in the office, and when we got the grant to run the Veteran Homelessness Program, I hired somebody. Woohoo! So despite me having a large name, we're pretty small, we're pretty scrappy, and we run with a lot of volunteers. So we do work really closely, though, with the Royal Canadian Legion and their structures. So that includes provincial service officers. So at the provincial level, we have paid staff. In BC, we have 3. And it's their job to connect veterans with Veterans Affairs Canada. So they can help with disability claims, they can help connect people that might need poppy funds or assistance, emergency assistance, and to help just connect in general. But the main relationship there is often with VAC and helping people complete the disability claims, follow up on them, hold hand, sit on hold if they need to, but really help through that process so that veterans can get what they need. And then we work very, very closely with what we call our branch service officers. So those are volunteers that are appointed at every branch. So again, those 145 branches across BC, most of them have a branch service officer who is a volunteer, and they are the first point of contact when a veteran arrives that might need help. And that could be help from anything, not necessarily experiencing homelessness, but maybe their partner died and they're looking for help with a funeral or something of that nature. So we do a lot of work with them. Okay, so Veterans House Victoria. So it was first established in 2009 as Cockrell House, and in 2016 the Legion Foundation purchased the property. So although we've had several renditions over the years, it's always been run by a few key volunteers who are sort of our boots on the ground. So on the right-hand side here are 2 of our volunteers. We have Dave and Terry. Dave is Navy, Terry is Army. We try not to mention it too often because, and they help with kind of the day-to-day running of the house. The layout of the house, so it's nothing fancy, it's a duplex. So it has a total of 5 suites, so 2 or 3 bedroom suites, 2 or 2 bedroom suites, and 1 is the studio suite. We have a live-in resident manager, and it's his job to kind of look after the property, kind of make sure things are kind of ticking along. He uses one of the 3 bedroom suites where one room is him and his partners personally. They use another one as an office, and then the 3rd one is used as a very emergency space. Knock wood, we actually haven't had to use that yet, but it would be in the case that somebody is in really imminent danger and needs somewhere to be housed temporarily. So our resident manager himself is a veteran, and he actually stayed at the house. He gave me permission to share that. He's quite proud. About a decade ago, he stayed at the house for a little bit, and he was going through a tough time, and is now fully back on his feet, totally different place, and wanted to give back. So he is a perfect person to be our paid employed staff on the grounds. So in addition to our key volunteers, we also have a paid resident management company that looks after the things I heard in one of the presentations this morning, like broken windows and stuff. They help us with the maintenance schedule of the house, keeping it looking neat and tidy, all of that good stuff. So again, everything's pretty basic, right? So each of the bedrooms have a double bed, a nightstand, and a dresser. The living areas are pretty basic. A lot of this furniture is donated by a local Legion. It's exactly how you think it might happen in a Legion, where there's a need that comes up, somebody sends an email to 10 of their friends, and next thing you know, some furniture arrives at the house. And it's pretty cool. And people are pretty humble, and they just get stuff done. And they're really committed to helping veterans, which is, I just can't say enough. Everyone keeps the house pretty neat and tidy. It's one of our main points. You'll see in one of the front pictures, we don't have big signage. We don't draw a lot of attention to ourselves in the community. We try to keep our heads down, keep the house neat and tidy, keep it well cared for, and our veterans do the same in the living quarters inside. They take immense pride in keeping the house in good shape, which we appreciate immensely. So, application process. So for Legion purposes, we consider a veteran to be anyone who has served in the Canadian Armed Forces or the RCMP. And so people formally fill out an application. to stay at the house. And although financial ability is one of the considerations, one of the two main things that we're looking for are need and then fit. Because it is close quarters, it is shared accommodation. We are volunteer run, so we are very upfront in that we do not have the ability to take on complex mental health issues. We do not have, unfortunately, we're not fully accessible for all disabilities. We're pretty upfront around our limitations. People need to be able to function pretty well on their own. Alcohol is allowed, smoking outside is allowed, but veterans are required to sign sort of a community agreement that if either of those things become a problem for either the comfort or safety of the others living at the house, that they'll be asked to refrain from that. And if they can't refrain from that, then they'll be supported in finding permanent accommodation elsewhere. So, yeah, we're temporary. So, in a perfect world, veterans are permitted to stay up to 2 years. That's what we consider sort of temporary. Housing crisis is everywhere, right? So I'm sure like lots of transitional houses, it's tough to find spaces for people when they're ready to move on. Some people are only here a few weeks, others are much longer, right? So we kind of use that 2 years as a benchmark, if you will, but it's certainly not hard and fast. Okay, really important stuff. So I don't know if I was going for a Halloween theme here or where I was going, but I always say it's a little bit like a web in terms of how we operate. So so many partners that are involved. So our day-to-day operations, the 2 volunteers that I said that are boots on the ground quite literally, are actually affiliated with a local 55 plus housing provider called Legion Manor Victoria. And in a perfect world, we have people that sort of stay at Veterans House Victoria for a little while, and when a spot comes up at Legion Manor Victoria, they just move into that community, which is a longer term community that also encompasses majority veterans. That's a perfect world. That doesn't always happen though. Within the actual Royal Canadian Legion, I mentioned we have our staff, so our provincial service officers that connect with that. We have our volunteers at the branch level, and branches also provide financial support for the program, which is amazing. Within the community, we are very, very privileged to have lots of support from community organizations. So that's everything from the local mattress provider down the road that we say, hey, we need a couple of new mattresses, can you help us out? And they say, sure, how can we help? To everything from, I could name all of the partners, and I won't because some of them are in the room here. But you know, we're really, really very fortunate that the community has rallied around this project, and we really feel like help is no more than a phone call away. And oftentimes, whoever we've called to help, if they don't know, they say, give me a second, give me a day, and I'll see if I can make a call and help somebody there as well. So then for the Legion Foundation, and where my responsibility and our responsibility lies, is we're sort of in charge of the big parts of the property. So the capital repairs and the fundraising for those, and sort of the long-term sustainability of the program. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our apartment kit program. So the Legion has a national strategy to end veterans' homelessness. And part of that strategy is called Operation Leave the Streets Behind. In BC Yukon Command, our little tiny contribution to that is what we call an apartment kit program that we also call Leave the Streets Behind. And so we assemble these kits that put together dishes and pots and pans and linens and everything you wouldn't have if you've been living in your car for the last 12 months, right? And we have kits that are housed with local Legion branches all over the province. And so when we hear a veteran that's moved into housing, we look up on our kit list and find out where we have the closest kit, and then our amazing volunteers often deliver that kit to the person at their new home, which is great. It's funny because we sometimes don't. We had the discussion when we were starting this program, and one of the board members had said, "Oh, well, you could just go to Valley Village and pick up this and that," and the discussion came up and said, "For crying out loud, when these guys got on a plane to Afghanistan, they didn't know if they were coming home. we can buy them new sheets. We can buy them new dishes. We can give them new things to let them know that they are welcome and appreciated, and it's a very small token. And so we really hold true and fast to that principle that we can't help everybody, but we can really help those that come. I had heard the phrase outcomes rather than outputs, right? We're small, we're scrappy, but we're proud of the work that we do where we do it. So some successes. Obviously, we could not operate without Legion support and support of the wider community. We feel that having a veteran peer support element is huge in the work that we do. It helps on so many levels. And then, of course, having our day-to-day as a housing partner is also been really, really great, because it does provide at least a little bit of an opportunity for that housing continuity where that's available. Some of the challenges, again, we're a charity, we're not affiliated with BC Housing, so we are all privately funded, so our funding is not guaranteed. So we constantly have to hustle, as I'm sure many organizations in this room do, right, to make sure that things work. We face volunteer burnout, right? There's only so many volunteers that are veterans, that are rock stars, that are willing to do this work at this moment. And we're always mindful that they also have their own trauma, and we can't be burning them out. So we try to keep it light, try to bring in humor where we can, and try to work together and ensure that people are supported. Military culture is that flip side, that peer support, right? And we see this in two instances. One is that we have some amazing volunteers that were in leadership positions within the military. As we often say, there's no democracy in the military. When you're given an order, you do it. And they are very, very, very good at making decisions and moving. Get it done now. That doesn't always allow for the collaboration and the many voices and the slow down. We need to do a few things. So we work together on that. The other thing that we see sometimes with our veteran clientele is that subordinate position where we're encouraging to say, it's okay to ask for what you need. It's okay when we're trying to find space for you to say, I'm not really comfortable living on the first floor, or I'd rather stay in this geographical area because that's where my kids are. When we're giving you choices and we're trying to support you, we're not giving you orders. We're trying to help, but it's okay to ask for what you need, right? So yeah, that's the other part that comes with it. And then of course the housing shortage, which I know is not news to anybody. I think our latest stats are Greater Vancouver, our vacancy rate is about 0.9%. Greater Victoria is a little bit better, about 1.6. It's tough, and it's a tough go, and I know it's a tough go out there for everybody. We're pretty fortunate, I think, again, eternal optimist, that lots of times when we make a call and we say we're trying to find housing for a veteran, that people won't immediately hang up the phone and say, okay, tell me more. And then, can share what we can. And sometimes we can get a little toe in the door where sometimes other groups were mindful can't. So, yeah, so that's our scrappy little program. That's my contact information there if you have any questions. And this is where I hope that the group doesn't have too many questions, because I'm definitely not an expert in this area. I think, they are maybe just short of their panelist, and they're like, hey, I'm going to come on. So, anyway, with that, I'll turn it back to Marie to moderate questions. That's great.
Thanks so much, both Amber and Cheryl. Amber, I so appreciated how you gave us sort of like a bit of national picture of Royal Canadian Legion and provincial, and then the program and sort of the continuum of housing thinking that's sort of been happening there. That's really great. And of course to Cheryl, I did not realize the complete third. I mean, we know the US has tons more research, but just, yeah, thank you for what you shared about what you're doing and the limitations of sort of women veteran research in Canada. So we are now at a point where we're open for questions. If anyone has questions of our folks on the panel here.
I intimidated y'all into asking.
Oh, great. Yeah, go ahead.
I I'm not sure that you would have data on this, but maybe anecdotally, I'm wondering, both for the women veterans that you're working with as well as the veterans applying for your programs, do you see any sort of hesitancy of veterans, maybe who have not deployed, feeling like they don't deserve that title or the services?
And can I just repeat, just because we're recording this
Yeah,
too, just so you can hear, so you're asking if folks feel like they're not deserving of some of the programs and services?
Yes, it's a barrier for veterans who have been deployed.
And that's what I had, that really brief point that didn't adequately cover it, like what is the definition of veteran? And it's a constantly evolving thing. And I know we've got people here for that, and we know that there's been numerous changes. And so, yeah, the one issue is around deploying. The other issue that we found a lot is also some changes around honorable versus dishonorable discharge, and particularly in context of things such as the gay purge, where that was reversed, but then somebody might have gotten a dishonorable discharge 20 years ago or whatever, I have to do the math, and not realize that that rule has changed. Particularly part of that time they've been on the street, right? So they may not. So part is they don't recognize their vet to say, because of what I said about the larger group, that by definition are they a vet, and that has evolved. And I would say the service officers with the Legion have been are often a great help to go through, get service validated, and many times people are surprised to find that not only are they a vet, but they do have some entitlement. The trans issue as well. Trans is not the same as gay, obviously, but many of the trans women that we work with, locally in London as well as elsewhere, got caught up in that gay purge as well. And I'm really glad that some of these key groups that we really need to tease out, and that's why we need so many, we already have some good, we're already starting to see representation in these groups, and their issues are so much different, but again, they often had, that group as well got those dishonorable discharges, so for a period, they weren't a vet. And some of them literally served for decades, and then we're not a vet. And deserve overseas, etc. So it is it's an excellent question. We basically we go with what FAC has told us, that if they complete a basic training.
And I would echo that, to sort of say that, well, I didn't see action, right, is the phrase that we hear. And because I didn't see action, somebody who did needs it more than me, right? So usually if they've arrived at our doorstep, they've kind of come to terms that they're a veteran. But the next hurdle is, no, you were just as worthy, just as deserving, just as in need as the person who might be 10 years your senior, but just happened to deploy somewhere, right? Or 10 years your junior, right? That might have deployed somewhere. It's funny because it's a unique circumstance too. It's not impossible, but it's certainly a rarity for us to see former RCMP that are in need help, and I would suspect that maybe that jump is a little easier for RCMP. So, but because of who we do see through the door, there is that element.
Great, thank you for your question. We'll go here first and then to the back.
Okay, all right.
I'm Giselle Fontaine, I work at Respect Canada, and I'm a veteran myself. My question is for Cheryl. In fact, knowing how women veterans that have experienced homelessness, they're pretty much invisible. They're not found on the streets or regular shelters. How are you getting You know, how are you finding these women for your research?
I'll just repeat the question.
Yeah.
How are you finding women for the research?
Yeah, please help. Yeah, it's kind of like detective work, and I think if I had not had such strong partnerships with various sectors, such as the Legions, it would be impossible. We find there's about at least 3 sources of data where we get the detective leads. One of them is the Legions, and they often do have lists that we check there in terms of who has come to access the Poppy Fund. Now, they can't give us the list, obviously, but it's a matter of contacting people, see if they want to talk to us. If they can re-find those people, because sometimes it's someone who came in a year ago, they don't know where they are now. The other thing is back as well. It's been very much part of this project, great support. And every 3 months, the back workers get a horrible looking spreadsheet with some of them we've heard about. And we see, because it doesn't actually have a name, it's got the service, like this number on it, but it does have a field on there about past homelessness. So if they look at that and look at gender, they would also have an idea, but then again, that would involve going to the case manager. You'd have to look up the actual name, not enough time with the back people in the local offices, then they got to go to the case manager, then the case manager has to talk to the person, so you get that. And then the third source is within the homeless sector, together with community entities that are collecting data, there is a field for gender and there's a field for veteran status, not always accurate. So again, we work with those groups, we can go and see and ask, could you just run this together? And I could say some of the communities have been surprised at how many they found by running that data together. They have that data. I would say everyone has the data, but a lot of places aren't running the data. So it actually is good for them too to run the data. So if you have data, please run it. But then similarly, then they got to say, oh, it's this women's shelter plus this particular meal program and whatever. And then we have to again get a hold of those people, ask them to be on the lookout. So it is like detective work. The women themselves, when they volunteer, often then have other networks, and then they often then help us. So, but it is really detective work. When I worked with the City of London, and I remember Jan Richardson, who was here from London, we talked about how to get people housed. What do we do? I always loved her phrase, whatever it takes. The final answer. And when we find some people and we're trying to get out, I give the example, that's what we do too. We try to do whatever it takes. Last week we were in Winnipeg, and I got us a hold of somebody 90 minutes away that had a cell phone that only worked when they're near Wi-Fi. That was in a small rural community, living outside kind of things. Able to get to a family member, gave us directions because there was no address to the place because it was a small rural community. And there was we couldn't find a car rental anyway. We ended up renting a small moving apartment to make sure we got there on time. And I kept thinking of Jan, and we do whatever it takes. And the funny thing was, it was one of those Home Depot vans, so when we walked around the other side, it says, how doers get more things done. I saved the picture in another slide. That slide's going to be there, but my doctoral student went out to the interview. She got there on time, but it was, and when she got into the van, she realized she had never actually driven a truck. but it's a lot of work. We walk, we go into encampments, we talk to encampment teams, we give them tips on what to look for a veteran encampment. We talk to all these different groups. We feel like we have to be physically there. We just send emails or phone calls. People don't look at it. It's when we go there, because it is a national study, but that's not an easy thing to do. But that's basically what we're trying. We're trying to show up and be available. Great, thank you for your question.
My questions for any of the three panelists. My name is Peter. I run a veterans program for veterans homelessness here in Ottawa called Operation Road Home with the Ottawa Inner City Ministries, and we're financed also by Infrastructure Canada. And my question has to do with the fact that we have virtually no women veterans in our program. And I'm kind of wondering, like, my clientele, and I'm kind of wondering what the problem is, what the barriers are to women veterans, kind of like coming forward and identifying as veterans to my program, because most of my clientele, they're mostly all, I would say older Caucasian guys, and either Anglophones, Francophones. And we actually go out in the streets of Ottawa once a week and we call it a fog walk. We put boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And we walk around virtually the entire inner city of Ottawa looking for homeless veterans. And sometimes we find them, sometimes we don't. But we have a very small percentage are women. And we have one person identifies as Indigenous. One person identifies as LGBTQ, but we have very few. We've had maybe two or three in the entire program. There's two parallel programs that I work with, and we've had maybe two or three who are women. I'm kind of wondering if any of the panelists can help me.
And the Legion data from the provincial command suggests there's 9 unique individuals in this area that are women veterans.
9 in this area, okay.
Yeah. So, but again, it goes to that those other difficulties that we find they often don't go to the shelters or for very brief periods. They may be more likely to go to meal programs.
Meal programs?
And certainly some of the leads we've had locally here are people accessing meal programs.
Okay.
But as well, like some of the women we've talked to, like again, this issue of people looking at them and shortlisting them on the not vet list.
Not veteran?
Yeah, but
Really?
because of other experiences when they look at them. For example, being in the sex trade, for example, and being in the program exiting the sex trade. And then people say, well, that couldn't possibly be a vet, so I'm going to skip that question, and because that can't possibly be a vet. This one is so young, she could not possibly be a vet. So I've heard that story from those kinds of stories from some of the women. Some of the women talk about they know that question is supposed to be asked, and they're not being asked.
As to whether or not they're a veteran.
Because they feel, and again, I'm going by what the women are telling me, that they feel they don't fit that stereotype of what a veteran looks like.
Okay.
It is complex. The women we have found mostly in the past are often outside smaller communities, like sleeping in cars, are quite common, sleeping in, something like a trailer or something like that, but something outside, a van, or occasionally if they're coming to town, they might drop by meal programs or spend a night or two in the shelter, but also often stay with other women veterans, particularly women they served with in the past.
Okay.
So this is the other reason we're trying to get a lot of veteran groups and talk to them, because the women are saying that they have people that they will stay with, but they're not obvious, and that's why it takes a lot of, but the ones you have found would be love to talk to.
Because I've noticed the ones that we have found, they have a tendency to be apart from the men in the group, and they have a tendency to stay themselves.
They're not thrilled with a lot of the housing, where they say they don't mind getting together, and part of their thing as well is we're regaining that label of veteran, but they prefer not, many of them have said they prefer not to have to live with them, and some of them we have talked, they're in situations where they're either in an apartment or tiny homes, and it's better than being on the street, but it doesn't appeal. A lot of the women have had previous, like I don't like the phrase in the American literature says, calls it military sexual trauma. The women I've talked to talk about trauma prior to the military,
Yes.
which influences how they interpret trauma after. Like it's like calling it military sexual trauma is like taking the last page of the story and calling that the book,
Right.
right? And so it's more complex, but it impacts how comfortable they would be in those kinds of congregate living
Right.
situations.
We do have a congregate, like a drop-in program as well, as part of this program that I'm part of. And quite the few times that the women do show up, they do have a tendency to sort of be kind of apart from the rest of the guys, and I've noticed that there seems to be a type of reticence to integrate into the greater.
In London, a lot of what we did there with the women we housed, we had a rinse sup and had them stay in neighborhood of choice. And they would get together with the men for certain activities, like to go to an art exhibit, or particularly military art exhibits, or a museum. They like to do stuff with the men, but not live with them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
This is where you can make a joke. I feel the same way about my husband sometimes. Other questions? Yeah, Oliver.
Cheryl, you talked about encountering veterans who are struggling with homelessness maybe more in a rural setting, settling isolated, and obviously that you sort of have a sneaking suspicion that that's how it presents, but it's hard to find.
It's one of the ways, yeah.
And I'm really curious if you've seen trends or anything that comes to mind in terms of how their needs present differently, as versus say a veteran who's struggling with homelessness in an urban setting. Is there anything that's come up?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think I need to take a deeper dive on that. I do find both men and women, a lot of them are spending more time out. And even in London, like I remember in some of our early studies, I'd often find them along the river, rather when they'd come to town. Like they might have some other place out when they had medical appointment supplies, but they'd be along the river. Under the bridges, that sounds something temporary. But that's a great question. I think I should take a look at that. Our other study we recently completed just on homelessness generally in Canada, where we went to every province and territory, interviewed 28 communities, and we made a point of including the rural communities versus the urban. And we thought that was really important because most of our homeless stats are urban centric, right? They're like so when you look at what data goes up and heightens to those national numbers, it's urban centers largely. You're more northern, more remote, smaller rural. So we did see a lot of differences in that, just general difference between rural homelessness. But one of them was we know that the indigenous populations are overrepresented in the homeless population. We're actually underestimating that by being so urban centric. By skipping those smaller communities, who's invisible? That would be invisible. The other thing that we found was that there was a migration to the city for services, particularly complex medical needs. And we found that as a difference, but I would say the biggest difference was that we're not counting a lot of indigenous people by not counting those small rural communities.
So this is one of the only veteran-specific sessions at this conference, and so I'm imagining all of the veteran folks who really care about this topic are in this room, and I did want to give an opportunity if you're like, okay, I'm from an organization and I just want other people in the room to know that. If you want to come talk to me afterwards, I know Respect Forum. If you guys
And I might pass out things to you.
and pass out some things. So I saw that Respect Forum is in the room. Oliver, do you want to just say quickly a little bit about your organization?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Oliver Thorne. I'm with the Veterans Transition Network. So we are based in Vancouver, but we operate across Canada. And we provide transition and mental health programs for members and veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP across Canada in English and French for men and women, always delivered free of charge. So we've recently also been funded under the Veterans Homelessness Program through Infrastructure Canada and Veterans Affairs, and very keen to connect with veterans who are at risk of homelessness and do that prevention work, improving mental health, improving connection with family, and hopefully stop them going down that path. Thank you.
I put you on the spot.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
My name's Grace St. I work with a small organization in Alberta, Shining Mountains, Living Community Services. We serve Indigenous people on the campus. And one of our gentlemen, he'd been known to my staff for quite a while in different locations, that he was homeless. And he came in and, you know, vets walk different. It doesn't matter how long they've known them. It doesn't matter. They just walk different. And so I asked him, are you a vet? And yeah. So we started talking. He was actually one of my husband's experiments in training. We'll call it for so when he found out, I asked him if this was my husband's family. Yeah. He was my training officer. He was the chief, he said, but he still treated me with I was peace. And I asked him, why haven't you acknowledged her death before? Because on none of this cadets in over 8 years, and he said, he had certain this, because I'm ashamed. And I'm up, and he said, I'm homeless. And I said, no, we are the ones who should. And so he's brought in another vets that had never acknowledged.
Thank you for bringing up that point about the power of veterans who get connected to service and then realize and understand the support and bring in others that they know. Yeah.
I think it's vital that we have some sort of connection and that they know that.
Yes, thank you for sharing.
Hi everyone, just thought I'd introduce myself as well. Ashley Mulligan from the Atlas Institute for Veterans and Families. We're funded by Veterans Affairs Canada. And I guess I was trying to think of, applications from our work that may be applicable to folks in the room. We do research. We also have a large knowledge mobilization component. So there are a lot of resources that we work together with veterans and families to develop that are on our website. So if you're working in shelters or what have you, transition homes, there's a lot of resources both for children and youth of veterans that are developed with veterans, youth of veterans, and in addition to resources related to military sexual trauma, intimate partner violence, traumatic brain injury, coping with events related to Afghanistan. There's just a whole host of resources, again, developed with veterans. I keep saying that because I think that's really important. So also, if you're a veteran, feel free to get in touch and work together to create additional resources. But yeah, feel free to direct people to our website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Joanne Bildo. I'm a veteran as well. Recently, I work at Pepper Pod. It's a veteran retreat center. And I was hired to develop a program as women veterans supporting women homeless veterans. So I'm just in the learning stage. I will be reaching out to everybody, and we're called the Connectors program. So we'll be connecting and hope we can do that detective work as well and connect with these women and get them to the resources that they deserve.
Thanks for your service, thanks for sharing. Where are you located?
Chelsea, back in Ottawa.
In Ottawa, okay. Is it national or it's an Ottawa
It's
program?
an Ottawa program with a pilot.
Yes.
And then I'm going to go.
Okay.
And we are funded by Infrastructure Canada as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been in contact with the group.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You're all gonna stand
And then we'll go
up
back.
and speak. So Al Malusham, the Executive Director of Veterans House Canada. We provide permanent, affordable, and supportive housing to homeless veterans. We operate one facility here in Ottawa right now, a 40-unit facility called the Annie Croswell Building. We're currently going to build in Edmonton as well. We're going to go again across the country from coast to coast.
Great.
I think you already have some.
I know you heard from me before, Giselle Fontaine from Respect Canada, but I just wanted to explain a little bit what Respect was. And it's an organization that brings together in all the different cities across Canada, meetings twice a year in the fall and the spring to bring service providers together so they know each other locally and can facilitate collaboration, networking, and hopefully refer veterans to one another, because there's not one organization that can tackle all the needs of veterans. So we're there to help make those connections locally. And myself, my own role is I'm the Women's Outreach Coordinator.
I'm Glenn Sigersma. I'm with the RCP Veterans Association. We have 30 locations across the country. We are brand new to the homelessness problem that we just started to experience a little bit more ourselves. We are working with Infrastructure Canada as well this year to, for the next 4 years, to boost their outreach. One of the things we're trying to do better is coordinate better with everyone so that we get homelessness to zero and within our veterans community. So, Mark's here with me as well, but I don't know what's important.
Also, I'm the program coordinator for the RCP Veterans Association. I'm based in Ottawa, but we have a across Canada program that we're setting up. Of course, as part of the Veterans Homelessness Program, we're part of a suite of services and support we give to our members and to the broader RCMP community, whether or not they are members of our association, which has about 6,000 members from coast to coast to coast. But we offer support and services to all deserving RCMP. Well, they all deserve our service and support. We had a homeless veteran in 2015 who was evicted from his rural apartment in rural Manitoba and froze to death in his vehicle. We found out about it afterwards. We helped the ex-spouse, the family members with the funeral arrangements, because they could not afford anything. But we often thought to ourselves, if only we had known. If only we had known. And so this is why we are so committed today to this program and delivering that support. And you talked about the shame. You talked about shame that these are proud people who have served. And it's embarrassing and humiliating and for them personally to admit that they need help, that they are homeless, and that is a barrier to letting us know. I agree, many of our veterans probably are in rural areas. We have detachments all across the country, far north, everywhere. So they may not be in a downtown core, they may not be going to shelters. They may be unreachable in any way. So we need a system by which they will come forward willingly, that they are being welcomed, that there's no shame or humiliation in their situation. And that's what we hope to achieve through this program. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Gentlemen, sorry, yep, and then we'll go in front and behind, yes.
Yeah, I'm still trying to form it in my head, the question, because I heard something. Well, my name is James, and I'm an aftercare worker for Native Med residents in Toronto. And we were talking about post-traumatic stress, okay? And a lot of, well, 100% of the guys that are Indigenous living on the streets are dealing with post-traumatic stress from either First Indian residential schools or the 60s school. And some of them who didn't have a home that they connect to, they got a home in the military. And then, like you say, trauma affects the way you see trauma, right? So you've experienced that ongoing trauma from the government, right? And then you got the trauma from like war, like Afghanistan. It's like, I know, like, we don't see all the gore that goes on in Afghanistan or in any other country, right? We don't see that, we don't see happy pictures. So, I was just wondering, how would you tackle something like that if you had a client on the street that was dealing both from being a veteran and like with that having like multi-layered. So, and not to say that it wasn't long ago that indigenous people lost their status if they fought for the government. So, there's a lot of things in there that I'm trying to sort of out.
Thank you, James. You both shared some really important information and insight, and you also have a question for the group around just how to work with veterans experiencing homelessness with multiple traumas, indigenous background.
Living in a tent, they have housing, they've been housed through rapid housing or whatever, and yet they can't stay there because they feel either they don't deserve it or, just they're used to living on the streets. And I'm just wondering how we go about dealing with that, because we all have encampments in our city. But like you see, like Allen Gardens in Toronto is like big. There's a TP there, little community right there, and it's just like it's been exacerbated and keeps getting bigger. So.
Thank you, James, for sharing. I'm thinking there's some folks in the room who may come up and chat with you afterwards about some options and resources for folks. But we're almost at time. I wanted to give a couple more people a chance just to say hi and introduce themselves to the group.
Hi, my name is Alexa Pasha. I'm from the Royal Canadian Legion at Denny Command. I'm a veteran service officer there. So my job predominantly is to support with the application and disability process with that. And some of you I know from the community as well. Prior to working with the Legion, I worked in the NCR with our homeless community. So that's where I started. I worked frontline at Normal Mission. That was, I was 19 years old when I started in this field. I love the fact that there's so many key players that are in this room. I know who you guys are and to hear more of who you are. It's phenomenal, and thanks everybody. And if anybody wants to contact us, please reach out.
Thanks, Alexa. Sorry, the gentleman in front of James. Yeah, go ahead. Or sorry, with the mask on, did you want to say?
Hi, where's Natasha?
Oh, Natasha, sorry, that's why she's with the mask on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natasha Bateman. I'm the Director of Policy and Infrastructure for Homelessness and the Veterans Program and all these other fun things that funding and homeless here. So I just wanted to make a plug. First of all, thank you all. I know working on the front lines is very, very difficult, and you do see a lot of trauma. You see a lot of different issues that you're fighting every day, and I greatly appreciate it, as do all the people that are working on my team. But I also just want to make a plug, and this was perfect timing, because there are a lot of homelessness organizations that have expertise in housing people and with these traumas and with opioids addictions and rent supplements and all the things that you may be struggling with because it's brand new for you. So I really, really encourage you to link with the community entities in your organization. There's also a rural and remote network if you're not in an urban center, but please reach out. Not everybody, as Cheryl said, do go to shelters, for women especially, but they go to no programs that these shelters run. There's employment programs they run. They do actually stay in shelters at some point. So we're doing point-in-time accounts right now across the country in many places. So we can find these people if we all work together, and the goal is to find them. As I said, we do not want anybody to find out afterwards, oh, it's too late to help them. We want to help them now. So please, I really encourage anybody that's in a veteran organization to please work with homeless organizations so we can really get everybody who is a veteran and is homeless housed as soon as possible. So thank you, that's just my plug, and I again just really appreciate all the work you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Sorry, I didn't recognize you
That's
there.
all right.
Your point
about funding.
Your point was really important, and some form of a pit count or a point-in-time count is going to be happening annually, and some communities have done a really good job connecting with veteran service organizations, getting cards or information, so when you're asking the questions, it's anonymous, but you can pass along cards or have folks along that can offer support, and some people have really done that pairing up really well, and it's been really effective. Go, yes. Sorry, your turn, yes.
Hey guys, my name is Allison McGee. I'm the Housing Stability Coordinator at Loving Care's Homeless Response Services, formerly a housing focused veteran worker. We have 2 veteran focused housing stability workers in our program. We support over 40 veterans who once experienced homelessness with moving them from street to home. We work with multiple agencies within the veteran community, including the Legion Leave the Streets Behind program. I just wanted to introduce myself because we work closely with Cheryl with her data research with our female veterans. So yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for sharing. I appreciate you getting to know each other in the room a little bit more, because I know from last year's conference, it's just such an excellent way that people were making some connections. So I hope that you enjoyed the session. We are on a break until 3:30 when the next sessions will begin. That wraps at 5. And just a reminder that there's a reception from 5 to 6:30 back up in the plenary rooms. We'd love to have you join us. You might have a free drink ticket on the back of your name badge, which is great, and then there's also a cash bar after that with your refreshments and food and whatnot, so we'd love to see you at the reception. All right, thanks everyone.